Welcome to the first of our two campfires to align with the World Mental Health Day this coming Saturday. Joining myself around this campfire on mental health, we have Matthew Williams, Ross Clark, Tracy Jefferson, Chad Williams, and Mark O'Reilly. I'll start. Hello, Ross. How are you?
I'm very good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Good. And what part of the world are you from today?
Down in Lymington in Hampshire, from
Okay.
Lawrence Boxing Club.
And I'll move up the screen. Hello, Chad. How are you?
Yeah, not too bad, Ivan.
Just a brief little introduction about yourself.
Just from Phoenix Boxing in Eastbourne. I help out the University of Brighton with some sports science support as well. But just joining in with just campfire tonight, so it'll be quite interesting.
And then I move on to a good friend of mine. Hello, Mark O'Reilly. How are you?
How are you doing, Ivan? Very good.
Very well. Do you want to just introduce yourself a bit?
Yeah, head coach for New Ashley Boxing Club in Newmarket. You know, it's the town of the horses.
Okay. And Tracy Jefferson, how are you?
I'm fine, thanks.
Do you want to introduce yourself a little bit?
I'm from Seam Boxing Club. I'm head coach. And things are looking good up here.
That's good. And finally, I'll move over to Matthew Williams. Matthew, thank you for coming on today. How are you?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you, Ivan. Thanks very much for having me.
Good. Where do we start with mental health then, Matthew? You sort of like evolve yourself around this a bit now. Do you want to just...
Yeah. I mean, for me, the important thing, and something I've been very passionate about for a number of years now, is normalising being able to talk about mental health and to recognise that it does affect a lot of people. Mine's statistics are that it's one adult in every 4 will experience a mental health problem in any given year. And in boxing, that equates to 1 person per corner of every contest. So it gives an idea of the scale of how many suffer, and yet people still feel that they need to suffer in silence. That it's not something that they can talk about, that they'll be judged. And there is still stigma out there. There's lack of awareness, and ever since experiencing my own struggles with mental health, it's something I've been very, very determined to help to break down, really, because it's a very dark, lonely, terrible place to be. And the more people that understand, the more it is that we can seek help and not feel ashamed, not think we have to beat ourselves on our own. I mean, you wouldn't think that if you had a heart attack, or, we just need to think differently about it and reduce the stigma that's there. And I think boxing's got a real role to play in that. It can make a big difference. I think if you've got high profile boxers that have spoken out, and I think so straight away, I think that helps to get rid of this notion that it means you're weak, because clearly, someone like Tyson Fury, I mean, he's not someone your stereotypical weak person. So we can start, really tackling some of those negative stereotypes, but also because boxing attracts a lot of people. A lot of the people that we know are at risk and are less likely to get help. So people that are from, potentially from difficult backgrounds in areas of deprivation, perhaps lacking some of the social family support that others may have. And, people that wouldn't want to speak out, wouldn't go to a doctor, wouldn't seek help from a counsellor. But in a boxing club, that is an environment where potentially they could speak to someone. But it's about making people aware that it's a safe, we have a safe environment to talk about these things, because it's about enabling that conversation to start, and that's often the most difficult thing.
Yeah. Okay. Ross, would you like to follow anything on that?
I suppose I'd like to talk to everyone. That's some good points Matt made. I suppose from my point of view, who do we think's most at risk? What are the causes of some of these problems, and what can we do about it? That's maybe some of the questions that I'd like to throw out to everyone, maybe to start a little bit of an interaction. What does everyone think?
anything could be the cause of it. It's just pinpointing where it's come from, isn't it? And seeing if the people will get help, because I find, well, I lost two, one boxer and one very good friend in the space of 4 weeks of each other. This has only happened a few weeks ago, and both of them, you wouldn't think that they were suffering from mental health, which way they spoke to you, which way their appearance. It doesn't mean because somebody's high, well dressed, that they haven't got mental health. All this can be hid from it. It's trying to source it out, where it's come from and what the pinpoint is.
What are everyone's thoughts on social media?
Bad.
Yes,
You
social media.
think it's bad, Tracy?
Sorry?
You said you think it's bad?
I think there's a lot of it, especially from the young children, from the young people. Social media, if they've got a downfall, somebody sees it, it's on social media and it's made bigger and bigger and bigger. Where years ago when I was young, there wasn't any such thing as social media.
It's an interesting one, because I think, like a lot of things, they're neither good nor bad in and of themselves. It's how we use them. And to social media, it can have a very negative impact on mental health. And you know, I think there's a lot of, today people are scared of what other people think. There's a lot of comparison that goes on, this idea that somehow everyone else's life's perfect when no one's life is. And this way kind of education on a lot of these things. But I think for me, there's been a lot of good that social media's done, in terms of there's communities online that you can find people online that you can talk to, maybe that you wouldn't be able to do so with people in your real life, so to speak. I mean, I know personally, through writing about my own experiences, I've reached and met a lot of people through social media. When I worked for England Boxing, the awareness stuff we did around mental health, again, had a fantastic response on social media. And I mean, there's a much bigger question on social media. You know, there's a lot of things about it that can be negative and damaging, but it can also be beneficial if used in the right way.
Has anyone seen the social media or the social dilemma? Sorry, the documentary. Yeah. So that's an interesting piece of work, and I swear I've done a fair bit of reading. It's quite it's quite a subject of interest for me, and I think what Trey said, for young people particularly at risk. I know some clubs who said that they don't allow their they don't not allow their kids to go on the social media. They can't control that. They don't tell their kids who they're going to box anymore, because I suppose it used to be that you might have heard the name maybe from fleeting interest, but nowadays they're on social media, they look on Instagram, they're looking on videos, and they can build this idea up in their own head of who they are, and they sort of start panicking about this person. Because I suppose when you put something on social media, it's always going to be your best stuff. So you probably, if you're on social media, it's going to be you smashing the pads, you know, having good rounds in sparring, and that can really affect you. I think you can really put pressure on you. And then I think Trace also said, caring about what other people think. Just, you know, you start thinking that if you fail, you're going to be humiliated. You know, people are going to mock you. And some of that social dilemma was a real eye-opener, I think, in terms of particularly because there are like Matthew, like you said, people being able to speak about these things more nowadays. And one American psychiatrist said that you know, there's no mental health crisis because, you know, it's just the figures have gone up just because we talk about it more. We're more open nowadays, so it's not really an issue. Jonathan Haidt, who's an interesting social psychologist, he actually looked into this. And he looked into hospital admissions. So this wasn't people saying, "Oh, I've just got an issue." These were actually physical harm, people self-harming. And I think for girls from 10 to 14 years old, in the youngest generation, it's gone up by 140%. And then for older girls, I think it's from 14 to 18, it's gone up by something like 79%. And suicide skyrocketed for girls, which is tragic. It's gone up by about 20% for boys as well. But this isn't an issue which is just You know, it's not a self-report issue where we're just saying, oh, you know, we're just more confident. There's actually a big problem. Yeah, anyone who's interested in that, I'd recommend you read maybe someone like Jean Twenge. She wrote a book called iGen. It's about the internet generation, when they came in, how social media played a part. Because I think we'll probably all remember when social media first came in Facebook, it wasn't really a problem because we had it on our desktop. So we have to get home, log in onto our desktop, and we'd scan around a little bit, and then we'd go and do something else. But as soon as that thing came in, it became a whole different ball game, because it was instant access all the time, and particularly for girls, I think. So Jean Twenge talks about sleep deprivation and also different types of aggression, because boys and girls differ in their types of aggression. So girls, even though we're very cross-wired, girls tend to be higher in relational aggression, so they tend to reputation sabotage more than boys. Boys tend to be more physically aggressive. So if you give them iPhones, girls are going to suffer more than boys. So we need to be, obviously, it's not slandering the girls. This is people who we're related to. This can be our daughters. And particularly, I think Jonathan Haidt's, his co-author of one of his books, Greg Lukianoff, he says, imagine being in high school, the worst aspect of high school, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You can't escape from it. That's one of the big problems. Matthew, sorry.
One of the things I'm very conscious of, and so I've had 3 really bad episodes of depression, and you know, I wouldn't describe myself as someone that struggles with mental health. Apart from that, you know, going back to what Tracy said about what caused it, I think this is one of the things that it's really, really difficult. I think people often think that there's a clear cause, and then so you address that, and then it's dealt with. But it's a very, very complex thing, and there might be a particular trigger, but there might not be. And there's so many factors can interact that, you know, and I've obviously thought and reflected and counseled a lot on, been counselled a lot on this. And, you know, it can be hard to really put your finger on sometimes. But what things that emerged for me, and that I think really tie in a lot with the modern world, and what you were saying there, Ross, I think pressure to meet expectations. I think a lot of people today feel they aren't good enough, and the comparing. It's that thing about, you know, comparing your worst days to other people's highlight reels, for instance. And I just that on its own, and then you go back to that, you know, it's like 24-hour surveillance, if you like, and feeling the need to portray yourself in a certain way. And I think young people, it must be very, very difficult. But I know it's something, and I've found with my work, I work in mental health, and seeing people where I think there's a big thing about where somehow if you're not kind of aligned, I don't like to use kind of that kind of, but in line or whatever, but with who you are, that you can't live and can't be who you actually are. I think that causes a lot of psychological pressure on people, and I think boxing, you know, that almost can amplify that, because it is a sport where it's about being tough, and you said, you know, smashing the pads, but actually what you feel inside, and you hear, you know, Calzaghe, Tyson, all these, you know, can be terrified inside, but you don't see that. And I just think that this, you know, honesty, being true to ourselves, and knowing who we are, and having a strong sense of self. And for me, these are the things that we should be teaching kids growing up, because that then helps you how to manage social media, how to keep these things in perspective, how to be resilient in the face of setbacks. And it's, you know, it's not an easy solution. But yeah, I think there's so much scrutiny that people feel they're under, and expectation, and fear of failure comes from that. And yeah, it's something that, particularly in boxing, you know, we've got to, in a competitive sport, it's something that to be conscious of.
Mark, do you want to come in? I know you know, how do you see from where you're sitting?
Basically, you're asking like where it comes from. My personal opinion is depression, especially, I'll talk about more depression than anxiety, but depression is hereditary. I honestly believe that depression is hereditary. People don't, there is nothing that sparks it off, because it's there all the time. It never goes away. I have struggled with depression all my life. I take medication for it. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, we nearly lost my daughter. My daughter tried to take her own life, and it wasn't a call for attention. She took 110 tablets and had suicide notes. And if my wife hadn't woken up when she woke up, we wouldn't have her now. So my nephew, my brother's son, he tried to do the same thing. So I honestly believe, especially I'm talking about depression, I honestly believe that depression is hereditary. It's how you manage depression. That's the key. Now, since my daughter got ill, I've started taking medication myself, and it has helped, hugely helped. But it never goes away. It doesn't get sparked off from a bad relationship. It doesn't get sparked off from somebody on social media put something. I can't stand social media in that sort of sense, because I never realized how much of an influence it has on young, especially young girls, and young lads as well. But it never ever goes. You can't switch it off. You can't turn it off and say, oh, it just could be today I'm okay. Take it by hour. I take my life by hour. You know, that's how I work. That's how it is. That's how it goes. It's done by hour. This hour, I'm fine. In 20 minutes time, I could be 20 feet under the ground. It's the feeling of, and this is how we have got to try and look at the kids. It's a feeling of being worthless, completely worthless, a failure, right? In my eyes, you know, I never spotted my daughter being the way she was, and I should have done. I feel like I'm a failure. But you feel like, I have felt like a failure all my life. This is why I push so hard as a coach, to give kids the chance that I never had. But what we have to do as coaches is we have to not only see and try and look into these young kids you've got to be able to pick up on everything, because a young child might come over to you and say something to you that actually, at the time when the gym's packed and everybody's shouting and there's a lot of hissing going on and there's a lot of this and that going on, you mightn't have registered what that child has said. But then when you go home, you know, my head never stops. So when I come home, I analyze the whole session in my head and I go, oh, flipping hell, such and such said something to me there. I remember that. I always feel responsible. I always feel our responsibility is to look after these kids as much as we can. I reach out to a lot of people on social media, like Matthew said, there is that side to it. I reach out to a lot of people, my own age, in my own work, because our job is so tough. It's so unforgiving, so dangerous. I only get 2 days off a month. It grinds you down. And young people in the horse racing industry, we have had so many suicides. It's absolutely ridiculous. And are they trying to do anything about it? Well, that's a different topic. But for me, they're not. But, you know, it's our job. It's our job to listen to every child. Little Johnny might be a little pain in the arse, but you've got to listen to him, because he could come up with something. He could say something, you know, I had a really bad day today. And you go, oh, did you? Oh, never. You over there, stop mucking about, you know, because this is what happens. So we have got to, I feel, this is my own opinion. I feel as coaches, we're in a position where we have to pick up on everything. And because I struggle myself and struggle every day, like I said, every hour, because I struggle so much with myself, I'm very aware of it, you know. With the incident that happened to my daughter, I am now more so than ever, much more aware of it, because I missed that. And I'll never forgive myself for missing that, but I did miss it. And I knew she felt depression, but I didn't realize that that's how far she was going to go. But, you know, but I will try on my heart that I would never let that happen again to any child. Because to feel that low, you know, I was talking to somebody today about it. When you feel worthless and you feel nothing is ever good, you know, people say this about you and that about you on Facebook, on whatever social media. Oh, you've done brilliant. You've done this, blah, 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 blah. That's lovely to hear. But within 2 minutes, in my head, it's big deal. You know, it's not good enough. Because people who struggle with depression as much as I do, you don't think that you're worth anything. As far as I'm concerned, you just feel useless all the time. And you do. You really feel useless all the time. So, you know, we as coaches have got to look at all these kids, especially nowadays. Depression's been around for, you know, mental health has been around for as long as I can remember, because I've had friends when I was growing up in Ireland in a poxy little flat. I've had friends that have committed suicide, you know, and I'm going back. I mean, I'm 56, so I'm going back a long, long time. So it's been around. It just was never talked about in them days. It's more open and more spoken about nowadays because it's everywhere. And all of a sudden you've got Ricky Hatton saying that he was suicidal, blah, 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 blah. Listen, I totally understand. Totally understand. How can a man like Ricky Hatton feel like that? He was world champion. He's won all these millions. That doesn't matter.
To me, see that. Sorry, but that it gets to the heart of, I think, the biggest misconception around mental health problems is that it's an illness like any other. You know, yes, that doesn't insulate you from, you know, from physical illness, again, heart disease, liver problem, whatever it might be. And again, people, and what you described in terms of how it feels. I mean, I always say, you know, people have this idea that it's because of something that you're thinking. So you think that, and then, oh, well, so just think something different. And it's like, it consumes you. It's like, and I'm fortunate. I mean, I you know, I've like I said, I've had those distinct periods where it was terrible. But other than that, you know, like I don't feel I battle every day, but I know what it's like to do that. And for me, it feels like, and it can come out of nowhere, that there's just an anchor just pulling me into the floor, and I can't stop it. And that's what people, I think, you know, any more than I could, you know, bound around my room with 2 broken legs. I physically, and I say it's like a surgeon cut out of me the ability to smile, to laugh, to talk even. I mean, I'm gobby, as you might be able to tell. I can barely speak when I'm depressed. It's horrific. I wouldn't wish it on anybody. And again, and you know that it's an illness. You know you're ill. You know it's not, you know, you're just thinking right, wherever it's. And I think that, and the talking is a big part of it. But going back to what you said, the noticing and that I think there is a lot more of awareness. And again, I think social media has helped a lot with that. But being able to talk is only part of it. Sometimes I think almost seen as a panacea, really, that you talk and you tell someone and suddenly everything's better. Now, a degree of a weight can be lifted at that point, but you need to feel listened to, which requires other people being comfortable talking about it, listening to it, which is difficult. And there needs to be resources and support and professional help to help you through it. And you know, we can all do our own bit in terms of kind of awareness and listening, but you know, like you said, you know, recognizing when someone maybe isn't quite themselves. But although, like Tracy said, I mean, sometimes, you know, that isn't always possible because some people are very, very good at disguising it. But you know, it comes back to this whole thing about taking mental health as seriously as it deserves to be taken, and again, creating those environments where we can talk about it, and because at least then we can start to see the chance of getting help and getting better. Because when you're in the midst of it, you just don't believe that you can. You just don't. Even if, I mean, again, been there and got through it before, makes no difference when back there again. Sorry, I'm going on, but one of the things I always try and explain it to people is, I always try and put things in a way, and I used to do this where I was kind of coach educator in boxing, that people can relate to. And saying it's like, for someone to say, well, just think that, be positive. It's like, well, if someone's rat-arsed and I say that, and the room's spinning, they go to bed and they're going to be sick, and I come in the room and says, no, there's nothing wrong with you. No, the room's fine. Well, yeah, to me it is, but to that person, it's not, because they're hammered. And it's, something else is controlling you. And that's how mental illness is to me. It's something else that's controlling me. It's got me in its grip, and I feel completely powerless. Completely. And like you said, worthless, powerless, all those things when it's in my grips. And when I'm not, I'm nothing like that. I'm like, gobby, and I'll shut up.
For mental health,
Back.
in Gene Tweng's book, iGen, which is quite interesting to look at, is number one is religion. So I'm an atheist. I'm a secular person, but I can really understand that. And very close behind religion is sport. Having a sporting group that you're part of, being part of a sports team or a community club. And I think we can all vouch for that, whether you've played for a football team, a cricket team, and you've had a really good experience with it and you feel part of something bigger than yourself. That's the big thing I think we talk about as well, which Trace said, on social media, there's so many people, you're comparing yourself to everyone. You're sort of swimming in an ocean and you're completely lost. Whereas when you're really in real life and you're part of a group, when we're in the gyms and we all know each other, and we talked about that last week, didn't we, with inclusion? And I made that point about sometimes having an isolated group of people is really, really good for people's mental health. Having that cohesive group around you, family and friends as well. So there's no doubt that lack of interacting with friends is negative for people's mental health, and that sort of ties in with social media. Kids live on their phones nowadays. They interact with people. They don't really see them in the same way that we would have. When I was a kid, we used to have to go on, knock on the door and find your friends.
Love that when I was a kid.
Yeah, and parenting styles plays a big part as well. So we all know about helicopter parenting, but the modern, even more modern style now that people talk about is bulldozer parenting. So parents that come in and smash any obstacle out of the way for their kids because they don't want their kids to face any difficulty. And there's no doubt that plays a big part in mental health issues. So Peter Gray is a guy who's written a lot of articles, and he's written a couple of books on it. I've read quite a bit of his stuff. The unsupervised free play in children has dropped dramatically, particularly in the Western world. There was a crime wave in the 80s, and Americans thought there was a couple of high-profile abductions. Cable TV became a big thing. So as soon as these things got out, people started to think, well, my kids are going to get abducted if I go and let them play in the street, which isn't a risk. It just doesn't happen. But people think that it does. And obviously, with if you think about unsupervised play, what did we do when we were kids? You used to get together, you used to formulate a game on your own, not with a teacher or an adult telling you what the game is. You'd create the rules yourself. You'd negotiate the rules. So there would be disputes and arguments. Someone would break the rules. Kid might punch another kid. You'd call him an idiot. But you'd settle the dispute. And eventually, you'd all become friends again. So that lack of conflict resolution in children is, when they grow up, it's causing some big, big problems. So if you're interested in that, I'd recommend reading Peter Gray's work. Jonathan Haidt, who Matthew, we talked about him, he was on The Social Dilemma. He talked about the self-harm rates with girls. He's got a lot of good TED Talks, a lot of videos on YouTube, and he talks about that as well, how effective unsupervised free play is as well. But yeah, I don't know if anyone's got anything to add on that, how they feel about parenting styles. Is there any experience of it in the gym? Do we feel like parents I think it's good to be supportive and maybe even a little bit pushy to get the best out of kids, but where does it go too far? And has anyone experienced sort of overprotection, things like that?
Yeah, I have. There was, I've got a little one, 7, and his mother's pushing and pushing and pushing. He's not interested. Literally not interested. He thinks it's just to come in and just play games, and obviously it's not. He's adamant that he's going to be this big boxer, 7-year-old. Yeah. He's got his full life ahead of him.
Parents living through their children sometimes, which is quite sad.
We had one young girl in the club, and she had a few issues that were quite apparent and stood out a little bit. She was a good boxer, and she's a bright young girl as well, and she'd studied psychology at university in at a master's level as well, sports psychology, and she had a bout coming up, and it was probably a month beforehand, before the bout, and you could see that she was still really anxious, and it was anxiety rather than just pre-bout nerves. And one particular coach, he'd suffered with some anxiety as well, and he knew someone to speak to in sort of the profession, mental health profession, and he went to him for advice, and built like a little session for all of the boxers to come to, with input from the squad boxers about how they dealt with anxiety and pre-match nerves and or pre-bout nerves, and it was a good little eye-opener for them, I think, and probably us as coaches as well. So it was a bit forward thinking in one way, when it shouldn't be, because it shouldn't really be like that around mental health anyway. But yeah, we sort of put together a little, I guess you could call it a discussion group around certain issues that people were having. But she found it really difficult. She'd studied sports psychology at a level where she found it difficult to put tactics in place herself, even though she'd studied it at such a level. So, I mean, it can be something as simple as that. It can come down to anxiety and just needing a chat or a bit of a G up before a bout, rather than, I mean, you've got all those other issues. And I think with a boxing club, it's so diverse in the different people that come in, so you have to deal with all sorts of different issues as well, around mental health. But as a coach, I think Mark picked up on it as well. You have to put on different hats and say, well, I've got to be able to spot this and spot that. And then sometimes you just got to, it feels difficult, but you have got to switch off, because it feels like there's only so much you can do, not just around the technical aspects of a sport, but around others as well.
I think that was, oh, sorry, Chad, but somebody said that I thought was really interesting. What he said about, despite all of that kind of understanding that she had, and I was still not necessarily being able to apply those things to yourself. And again, that is something that we can understand something here, but it can be very difficult to fully understand ourselves, and also to see things in ourselves. And I think that's where one of the things I've learned is to take note. If a few people say to me, "Are you all right?" and I might feel all right, but I've started taking notice of that and being more conscious of whether I actually am or not, because it can creep up on you. And I guess in the same way, the role of a coach, you can see things from outside the ring that they can't necessarily see inside the ring. I think it can be quite a similar thing. And again, the importance of people having that awareness, because people can pick up and notice things that you wouldn't yourself. And I mean, one of the things that I'm very keen to do, and why I kind of talk somewhat, one of the reasons I like to talk really about my own experiences, because clearly it's a difficult thing, and we hear that the real terrible consequences that can be of people that have struggled and taken their own lives, and just tragic, terrible. But one of the things sorry, I was going back to what Mark said about that, tablets, almost everything about mental health, the stigma around. You go to the doctors, you prescribe tablets. Again, as a bloke, first thing, I'm not taking them. Got to beat it on my own. Again, any other time, you don't. You just take it. But speaking to someone in the first place, the stigma, you've got to overcome. What will people think? Will it affect my job? Will it? At every step, there feels that there's a real risk of judgment. And I can honestly say that I never want to go back there again. But my life is so much better for what I've been through in terms of what it's taught me about myself. And going back to this idea of weakness, and having gone through that, and again, anyone that's struggled with any form of mental health problem, just how strong you have to be to get through that. Because it's just, and so for me, and this like I said, for me, meeting expectations and stuff was always a thing, but I don't care what people think of me anymore, because nothing can be worse than what I've been through. Nothing. And I got through that. So I feel stronger than I ever have been because of that. And it's something I like to tell, because it is very scary to ask for help and to admit that you can't cope on your own. We all want to feel we can. I guess it's like in the ring. You know, you know, whatever happens, you can deal with it. You're in there, you're on your own, you can deal with it. And it's very hard to accept that actually, I can't deal with this on my own. And particularly again, as a young man, I'm not quite so young now, but you know, it is, and you realize all these things that you've almost subconsciously just taken in through growing up, about that you're not meant to cry and you're not meant to struggle and you're meant to just get on with it. And you know, and it's when you're in that place, it just yeah, you realize just how strong you have to be to have, you know, to have dealt with that.
I think that's something we've got to teach young people as well, in my opinion. I listened to a psychologist who does Bible interpretations. So he analyzes the Bible from a psychological point of view. Obviously, like I said, I'm not religious, but I find it fascinating in trying to understand what the stories mean. And he said, this is a really interesting interpretation, that the story of Jesus walking uphill with the cross to be crucified. And he said, the interpretation, this is the Western ideal, is that you bear a load, you carry the heaviest load that you can, and you go uphill. You know, that's what we're all doing, isn't it? We're all marching to our demise to a degree. I think we need to teach kids to take responsibility. And you know, I know we don't want to say that they can't ask for help when they can, but if they are suffering, or if they are, you know, in any way, the biggest thing we can do to help them, I think, is to help them take responsibility, in my opinion. And another thing I wanted to ask as well, which was an interesting point, is do we think the world's a bit too serious nowadays? I mean, in my opinion, and this is my opinion, and I've talked to a few people about it, I've seen a real decline in comedy in the public eye. And I think everyone, I know we need to be, I'm always careful how I talk to people, but I think people are over careful nowadays. I think we've lost the ability to laugh at ourselves and each other. And I think that's a really, really negative impact in society, because everyone's worried about upsetting people, which is a fair enough. You don't want to go out intentionally to upset people. But sometimes you might make a joke and have a little bit of a laugh, and you might inadvertently upset someone, and you know, that's fine. You should apologize if that happens and explain that you didn't intend to. But I think nowadays, I just think things are too serious. I think we've lost the ability to laugh. I don't know what anyone else thinks about that.
Yeah, I mean, horse racing, the horse racing industry, we live on banter. You know, it's part of because we're all stuck in it together. We live on banter. So, you know, if you were to take things to heart, then you wouldn't last in the business. You got no chance, you know, because you're literally called anything and everything, but nothing's ever meant serious by it. No. But
sorry, Mark, I was thinking, you know, so you go somewhere like boxing to switch off from that. And yeah.
Boxing, how can you switch off from boxing?
Into the fire.
How does anybody switch off from boxing? Please, somebody tell me. But yeah. the thing about laughing and joking is, yes, you can laugh and joke. You know, I mean, I had a young pro I looked after, and we went to the depths. We went to the bottom. You know, while we were training, and he never realised that I had any sort of mental issues, because you learn to cover it up so well that nobody can tell. Nobody can tell. So, you know, being serious and that, I mean, I'd probably agree with you. I think the world has gone very serious, especially with the situation we're in now, with this bloody virus and that. You know, everything is serious. But, you know, it's very hard for somebody who's stuck in this sort of quagmire, if you like. It's very hard to get out of it. There is no way out of it. It's learn to live with it, or the other one is, you know, top yourself. That's the mindset. That's the mindset of somebody who struggles with mental illness. Now, I've never read anything on this. All I'm doing is telling you from what's inside me. You either deal with it or you don't deal with it. But the older you get, the more you can deal with it. The younger people, I feel so sorry for them, because they're so confused. They've got all of this going on in their head, you know, and a lot of the time, a lot of them, all they want is for you to put your arm around them and say to them, listen, believe in yourself because I believe in you. When was the last time that you ever, that you had somebody say to you, I believe in you? You would not believe how much of a boost that will give somebody. If you say to them, listen, believe in yourself because I believe in you. You know, it's all right saying, believe in yourself.
Yeah.
You know, oh, okay. But they pick up on emotion. They pick up on passion. People they don't think they do. They do. They pick up on every little movement of your eyes and your head and your emotion. They pick up the tone of your voice, everything. So you have got to, we've got to look at these kids and say to them, listen, we all have little shits in the gym. We all have them. But sometimes they're being little shits because of the way that the way their outside life is, right? So they're probably going to struggle with, at some stage, they're probably going to struggle with mental health. Tell them you believe in them. Tell them, listen, I know you can do better than that. I know you can behave better than that. You know, I believe you can do it, rather than just say, well done.
That's a really
We're
good
all
point.
guilty of it.
Yeah,
We're all guilty of it.
That's a really good point, Mark. That's a really good point. I think I've heard about that as well. Just the lack of encouragement that kids feel nowadays, you know, and I think that they get a lot of finger wagging at school. Don't do this, don't do that. And like you said, all they need is a little bit of encouragement to see where they're going. And you mentioned about the banter in the horse racing industry. I think it's useful. It's used because you prod and poke and you sort of test each other and you sort of see can we rely on each other, and it breaks down barriers. It doesn't build them. You know, it's can we rely on each other? Are you there for me? And I think having that little bit of fun interaction with each other where we share raillery, good humoured teasing, I think that's really, really important. And then I'm going to go out on a limb. I think the whole performance over outcome argument is got a little bit out of control. So there's a coaching idea that the performance matters more than the outcome, which is a nice idea, but I think anything carried to the extreme is a bad idea. And I think it's gone a little bit too far. I think we need kids want to win. They badly want to win. So we don't want to put the idea in their head that the winning doesn't matter, because I have seen a lot of coaches like that. Don't worry about winning. The winning doesn't matter. It's the outcome. It's just the performance. It's not the performance. It's both. You know, you can say to a kid who comes out and loses, I'm really proud of you. I thought you boxed brilliantly. But if they didn't box brilliantly, then we need to tell them. We need to say, look, like you said, Mark, give them some responsibility. Give them something. Say you believe in them. You can do better than that. You can box better than that. You don't have to beat them into the ground for losing. But you need to be honest with them, because I think kids know when you're not being honest. It's obvious. So I think that's part of the argument for a little bit of an argument for me as well. I think we're maybe taking kids' ambition away by drawing this line in the sand that winning doesn't matter. Kids want to win. You know, we're all competitive creatures, and we all want to win. We want to do well in our lives, and I think we need to embrace that and feed it to kids. I mean, as a level 4 coach, you go through your courses, and you sort of, you're taken in that sort of direction, right? But as a personal person, you either win or you get beat. You can be proud of that as well. You can be proud of your performance. You can be proud of taking part. And
you either win or you get beat. Nobody remembers who was second. The only person that remembers who was second is the person who was second. Nobody ever remembers who was second. So that's an old type point of view, and that's what I have had shoved down my neck from the time I was 4 or 5 years old. You either win or you get beat. There is no second. Don't believe in seconds. Now I have to come round the other way as a coach and bring positiveness into failure.
Yeah.
So you've got to find something positive to say, but at the same time, don't be saying things that are so positive that the kid gets out with false ideas in their head, saying, right, I got beat, but get me a rematch because I'll batter that kid next time. Well, you probably won't.
Or I've already won before I got in there because it's the effort.
So it's, I'm very, very, very much into the psychological side of coaching, very, very much into it, and it's one of the things that I've gone off my own back, and I've tried to sort of do things myself with it. But I'm very much, as a coach, I'm very much into that side of it. But my own belief is a completely different thing, and I have to sort of, a lot of the time it's okay speaking to you guys about it, but a lot of the time I keep that to myself.
I think there's a couple of things that I want to pick up based on. I think it's really interesting what you both said. One of the things I think is again a big factor in mental health or mental ill health, how we define ourselves. And again, boxing is a very intense one-on-one sport where it can be very isolated and lonely. And what it means to be a boxer and a fighter, and we can if we define ourselves too much by what we do, that can be if that's not going how we want it to, we can really struggle. I think this is where people retire, people lose a job, they can really lose their sense of their identity of who they are. And I think going back that thing that you said there, Mark, about the I believe in you. Is that about valuing them as them, not just what they perform and I think touch on what you said, Ross, I think, and about the world becoming too serious. And I think again, particularly young people, that they're judged and marked at every stage. I mean, SATs and from homework when they're starting infants is just ridiculous in my opinion. You're constantly told that your worth is about things other than who you are. And I read a quote today that I just thought, it's talking about something about earning a living. And it says, that it's essentially saying that you need to pay for your right to be alive. You have to, you don't have to earn a living. And I mean, I'm really interested in this whole area. And for me, like being yourself, and a brilliant book I read on depression and anxiety recently, and you might have come across it, Ross, Lost Connections by a guy, Johann Hari.
Oh, Johann Hari, yeah, I know.
The social, because he's done stuff about addictions as well, but the social causes of depression. Like you might agree, I think there is a big hereditary.
Talk about the Amish, didn't
element. Yeah, that's right. And talk about how we've lost connection with each other, with nature. And one of the big ones is that value you with meaningful work, with purpose, and talks about things like universal basic income, for instance, so that people can make life choices that are fulfilling rather than just to pay the bills and be miserable. And there's some really interesting stuff in there about how we live. Because one of the issues, and going to what you said, Tracy, at the start about identifying those reasons, because we can internalize them, and it's all about us. There's a problem with me. It's a fault with me. Whereas actually, often there's a fault in how we live. To me, there's a fault in judging kids in their academic performance at 4, 5, 6 years old. But I think coronavirus, it gives us a chance to really question what kind of world we want to live in, because the world we lived in before has stopped, and it's not going to go back to what it was. And we see a lot of things, and I used to always get called idealistic and whatever, but why? Everything is a construct. The way that we live, the beliefs, they're all things that have been created. So we can think and create a better way of living that actually is better for us. Because I believe a lot of modern life, whether it be social media, no boundaries between work life and home life, all of this kind of stuff, it's just not good for us mentally on the whole. Right, I'll climb off my high horse now.
So just one. So Tracy, when you spoke about those two people who lost, you're talking about like lads and that. So what kind of family life, or what kind of family life did they have?
One very good friend. When I first started at Lambton Street coaching down there, he used to come in, and on a Tuesday night was open sessions, and he would train down there. and we ended up being like a big circle of very good friends. Lee took his life 6-7 weeks ago, and then he just had an ordinary life where he was out working, going to the gym, training. He done the unlicensed fights. He was involved in the boxing quite a lot, unlicensed wise and other things. And then I had Thomas, who was one of my boxers, just gone 18. He was going out with my daughter. He'd stayed at mine at the beginning of lockdown. He'd gone to see a relation, and the family said, with ill health, we can't have his back here. Can't have him back here in case he's got this virus. I says, well, come to mine. He stayed at mine for 4 weeks. He went back home. But I think he had mental health from missing his mother, because his mother had walked out the life. And I think that's what part of it was. He never got back in touch with me after he went back home, but he was still in touch with my daughter. And then just out of the blue, suicide. And the full gym that week that happened, and leading up to his funeral, the gym was just flat with the senior side, totally flat, trying to lighten the pace. So we were all upset, the coaches, and couldn't lift it. But mind, at the funeral, they stood in proud. Every one of the boxers turned up with the hoodie on and stood at the side for the waiting for the cabinet to go past. It was absolutely, they were fantastic, my boxers. Each and every one.
It's like a family. It becomes like a family, doesn't it?
It does.
Yeah, picking up on that, Mark, I mean, that community feel in a club when I was growing up, I mean, I sort of had that feel with football teams I'd played for, but for a long time, between being a teenager up until a young man, I wasn't quite feeling that. I never had that. And then when I got involved with the club that I'm at now, that community feel, it felt like a bit of a relief, because I thought in society that things had probably changed a lot more than perhaps when you were growing up, when everyone knew each other, and along your street everyone got on and you could knock at each other's doors and things like that. I thought that had completely gone, but coming back to being at a club and feeling that community feel, it's just that bond that feels so strong as well with being in a club. I mean, even when I go down there, it feels like my own little private island. Do you know what I mean? It's my little sanctuary, even as a coach. So
you're the Branson of Eastbourne, aren't you?
Yeah. So yeah, God knows what it feels like for some of the boxers when they come in and they if they use it to the best of their abilities and use it positively. So
that's one of the things where I believe boxing can have, again, a massively positive impact on so many people's mental health, because say that connection is so vital for us. Say it's something that, you know, we've talked about throughout this has been, you know, impacted in the, you know, by our modern way of living, and boxing club, they do have a sense of community that I think very few places have. And again, and that can be obviously a very, very positive impact, influence on people's lives. And it's something that that one of the things I'm really, really keen on. I mean, you know, where I've seen clubs that have, you know, opened out specifically for sessions to bring in people that are struggling with the mental health. You know, people that would never have dreamt of going to a boxing club. And there's often this idea that, you know, it's a tough, intimidating place. But, you know, boxing clubs can be very welcoming, like you say. And then there's the banter. It's a laugh. You know, the nature of the activity where you can kind of, you know, get your frustration out to an extent. There's just so many things about the environment. And I love the idea of these kind of train and talk sessions that clubs run. You know, and a lot of how we can kind of have a positive impact on mental health. You know, they're not complicated things. You know, just having that train and talk, you know, an hour after the session, have a cuppa and a chat. Don't have to set an agenda. It doesn't say, let's talk about our mental health. You know, it's just like, you know, how's it going? You know, God, you know, I heard this happened. That must have been that. Or did you see him in the, you know, how did you deal with something like that? And just get talking. And particularly with men, I always say this, there's this idea that men don't like to talk about emotions. Men don't like to talk about their struggles. And I think it's rubbish, because I think that they don't feel they can. If they're in an environment where they feel they can talk about it, they will, and they'll tell you all sorts. I've found that myself just through me talking about my own stuff. And just through the week, I had someone I'd not spoken to for years from boxing phone me up, seeing what I've done online. You know what, you've just made me real. I've gone through something like that. And because, you know, and I've recognized it, and you help people talk about it. Just because I've rambled on about my own stuff. But it does, people what no one wants to carry a burden on their own, but they need to feel safe enough to be able to share it. And it's it, and that doesn't have to be intense, right? Tell me your problems. You know, it's like, let's have a couple in a chat. You know, get your frustrations out on the bag. Let's chat. How do you feel? How's it? You know, and it can be very simple and can make a big difference. And say boxing clubs are so well placed to do that.
It's about trust, isn't it? I think that's what you said. But I think, like you said, you know, about guys do want to talk about it, and I think you're right. I think there's a bit of a. It's not untrue that maybe people have not talked about it as much as they might, but I think there's a bit of a false narrative out there that don't talk about them and their health issues. Just look at the amount of writers, philosophers, poets throughout history who have talked about human condition. You know, it's nonsense that never spoken about this sort of stuff. But it was interesting what you said, Chad, because you mentioned about your own little community, your own little private island. When we had a little lad who moved down from London with his family. His sisters took part in the beginners. One of his sisters actually had serious brain injury. She's fine now, thank God. But he's boxed for us, and at the presentation, the first year he boxed, he only had one skills bout, I think, at the time. His mum came up to us and said, "Thank you so much. We didn't know anyone when we moved down here." He said, "Now we feel like we're part of something." And it sort of gave me a little bit of goosebumps, and that would, beyond anything else, I sort of thought, well, that's why I do it. You know, that one little thing there, that's why you do it, really. You can make such a difference in people's lives, and not just the kids that come in, it's the families as well. Because his dad now lost a lot of weight. He's much healthier. He joins in some of the classes. Obviously, the family feel like they're part of something. The girls have obviously been involved in the beginners, and I think they've met people through school and gone to the beginners class with them. So it's a domino effect, really. It's not just one person you help, it's so many people.
I think that's a good way to finish this campfire, a very positive thing. Thank you all for coming on. I'd just like to say that the box gathering really arose from the COVID and through me talking to people online on chat and saying, how's it going? And they were looking at four walls and saying, look, I can't wait to get back to boxing, and I'm lonely and I'm living on my own. And there's quite a few coaches out there, male and female, who didn't have much to speak to at that time. And the gathering come around about getting everybody to talk, and here we are now, 8-9 months down the line, and we're running little private little chats and that around everything. So
an amazing job, right?
We started off as that. Thank you very much, Mark, for coming on, being very open. Tracy, same to you. I know it would have been a tough time only recently for yourself. So, and obviously Ross for your input. That's really good. Matthew, as always good to sub it. And me and you, Chad, we had a fun just listening in and being part of it. Thank you very much for your time.
Sorry, I was going to say, Ivan, what you said there, I mean, that kind of rounds off because everything we've talked about, because this group, you know, these groupings, the big group, these ones, get that sense of community, part of something, you're contributing something bigger than yourself, and you know, I've loved being part of the ones I've been part of. I've got a huge amount out of, and you know, listening to everyone else's experiences, and you know, I've taken a hell of a lot from it. So thank you.
I'm sure anyone listening to this wants to get more. Then obviously England Boxing Do Wrong, Boxing Mind, and they are launching a big mental health section, which will be on the website in the next couple of days, I think. So yeah, so drop on to England Boxing if there's things that you want to look at. But thank you very much for your time, much appreciated. And
thanks, Ivan.
I look forward to part 2 tomorrow. Thank you.
Cheers, everyone.
Thanks for joining us today on The Box Gathering. We welcome the global boxing community to connect and share together in order to grow participation, engagement and performance in all of our boxers. Join the discussion on social media or visit theboxgathering.com for more interviews, skills videos, literature reviews, bout analysis and more. The Box Gathering, in partnership with England Boxing. Connect, share, grow.